There is a man who ruled the most powerful empire the world had ever seen. He commanded armies, settled disputes between nations, held the fate of millions in his hands. He could have had anything. Every pleasure, every comfort, every excess was available to him at a whisper. And yet, when historians and philosophers look back across the entire span of human civilization, this man is remembered not for his conquests, not for his wealth, not for his power, but for his wisdom. His name was Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome. And every morning, before the world demanded anything from him, before the senators arrived, before the generals brought their reports, before the weight of empire pressed down on his shoulders, he sat alone and he wrote. Not decrees, not laws, not proclamations. He wrote to himself. Notes of discipline, reminders of what truly mattered, reflections on how to be better. That collection of private writings survived nearly 2,000 years and has since become one of the most widely read philosophical texts in human history. It is called the Meditations. And inside those pages, if you read carefully enough, if you look past the surface and into the bone of what Marcus was actually practicing day after day, year after year, you will find 10 habits. 10 specific, repeatable daily habits that shaped a man of extraordinary character. These are not abstract ideas. They are not philosophical theories meant only for scholars. They are habits, things Marcus actually did, ways he actually lived. And the remarkable truth is this: every single one of them is available to you, right now, today, regardless of your circumstances, your background, your resources, or your history. You do not need an empire to practice the wisdom of an emperor. You only need the willingness to begin. So let us walk through these 10 habits together, one by one, and understand not just what Marcus Aurelius believed, but how he lived, and how you can live the same way, starting from this very moment. Habit number 1. Begin each day with a reminder of what is hard. Most people wake up and immediately reach for comfort. They check their phones, they scroll through feeds, they pour their coffee, they ease themselves into the day as gently as possible. Marcus Aurelius did the opposite. He began each morning by reminding himself that the day ahead would contain difficulty. In the Meditations, he wrote that when he woke, he would tell himself, "Today I will encounter meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous and surly people." But he did not stop there in despair. He continued, "They are like this because they do not know the difference between good and evil. And I, having seen the nature of good and of evil, know that none of those people can truly harm me, because no one can implant evil in me without my consent." This practice, this deliberate morning rehearsal of expected difficulty, is not pessimism. It is the opposite. It is preparedness. When you wake expecting the day to be easy and pleasant, and it is not, you are twice defeated. Once by the difficulty itself, and once by the shock of encountering it unprepared. But when you wake having already acknowledged that people will frustrate you, that plans will fail, that the weather of life will not always cooperate, you are no longer caught off guard. You have already made peace with the imperfection of the day before it begins. The Stoics called this practice premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. It is a habit of mental preparation that transforms difficulty from an enemy into a known companion. Try it tomorrow morning, before you touch your phone, before you speak to anyone. Sit with yourself for one moment and say, "Today will contain difficulty. Today will contain people who disappoint me. Today will not go entirely as I planned, and that is acceptable. I am ready." Notice how that single practice changes the texture of your entire day. Habit number 2. Distinguish what is in your power from what is not. Of all the Stoic teachings, this one sits at the very foundation. Marcus returned to it again and again throughout the Meditations, not because he had not understood it the first time, but because it requires constant reinforcement. It is easy to forget. The fundamental distinction of Stoicism is this: there are things that are up to us, and there are things that are not up to us. What is up to us? Our judgments, our intentions, our efforts, our character, our responses. What is not up to us? The weather, other people's behavior, the outcome of our efforts, reputation, wealth, health, the opinions others hold of us. Now here is the crucial point, and it is one that almost everyone misses. The Stoics did not say that the things outside our control do not matter. They said that those things should not be the source of our deepest suffering or our deepest joy, because anything that can be taken from you without your consent cannot be the foundation of a good life. Marcus understood this viscerally. As emperor, he watched people suffer terribly over things they could not control: floods, illness, the cruelty of others, the unpredictability of fortune. He watched people make themselves miserable trying to control what was inherently uncontrollable, and he practiced every day, returning his attention to what was genuinely his character, his choices, his effort, his integrity. When you begin to practice this distinction in your own life, something remarkable happens. The enormous amount of mental and emotional energy you have been spending on things you cannot control begins to return to you, and you can redirect it toward the only place it can do any good, toward what you actually have the power to change. Ask yourself tonight, what am I currently suffering over that is not actually within my control? And what within my control am I neglecting because I am too busy worrying about what I cannot change? Habit number 3. Do the work in front of you, completely and with full attention. Marcus Aurelius had a word for this that the Stoics valued enormously: present moment focus, what we might today call deep attention. He wrote in the Meditations that a man who scatters himself across 100 tasks does none of them well. That the quality of your action depends entirely on the quality of your attention. And Marcus lived this. Despite managing an empire of remarkable complexity, despite the constant flow of demands and crises and decisions, he trained himself to give his complete attention to whatever was immediately before him. When he was hearing a legal case, he was fully hearing a legal case. When he was writing, he was fully writing. When he was speaking to a person, he was fully present with that person. We live in an age that has made this habit almost impossibly difficult. We are surrounded by constant interruption, constant stimulation, constant demands on our attention from 100 different directions simultaneously. The average person today checks their phone over 90 times a day. We have been trained by our technology to scatter ourselves, to multitask, to skim the surface of many things rather than plunging deeply into any one thing. And the cost of this is enormous, not just in productivity, but in the quality of our inner life. There is a kind of peace that comes only from being fully present. There is a kind of satisfaction that comes only from complete engagement. You cannot experience that peace, that satisfaction, while you are divided. Begin practicing this habit in small ways. When you eat a meal, only eat the meal. When you have a conversation, only have the conversation. Put the phone away. Close the other browser tabs. Give the one thing in front of you the full gift of your undivided attention. Marcus would recognize this immediately. He called it doing one thing at a time, with complete application, as if it were the only thing in the universe that mattered. Because in that moment, it is. Habit number 4. Practice voluntary discomfort. This is the habit that separates the merely philosophical Stoic from the genuinely practiced one. Marcus Aurelius did not only read and write about strength, he practiced it deliberately in his own body and life by regularly choosing discomfort when comfort was available. He slept on a simple mat when a lavish bed was offered. He ate plain food when elaborate feasts were prepared. He trained in the cold. He walked in harsh weather. He sought out situations that would test his endurance rather than simply enjoying the nearly unlimited comfort available to him as Emperor of Rome. Why? Because he understood something that most people do not. Comfort, when it becomes the default expectation, becomes a prison. When you need comfort to function, when you cannot tolerate cold or hunger or tedium or physical hardship, then you are governed by your need for comfort. You become fragile. You become dependent. You lose the inner freedom that comes from knowing you can endure whatever comes. The modern Stoics and psychologists call this inoculation. Just as a vaccine introduces a small amount of a pathogen to build immunity against it, voluntary discomfort introduces small amounts of hardship to build immunity against suffering. When you fast one day a week, you are no longer afraid of hunger. When you take cold showers, you are no longer dominated by the desire for warmth. When you push yourself through a difficult physical training session, you learn that you are more capable of endurance than you believed. Marcus wrote, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? Strip away everything that is not necessary. Learn to live on less. Not because you must, but because you can. There is enormous freedom in the discovery that you need less than you thought you did. Begin small. Tomorrow morning, take a cold shower. Not the whole shower, if that is too much at first. Just 30 seconds of cold at the end. Notice the resistance in your mind. Notice the voice that says, no, this is not necessary, just stay warm. And then, despite that voice, choose the cold. That moment of choosing discomfort despite the availability of comfort is a direct practice of Stoic freedom. It is a small act of mastery over yourself, and it compounds. Habit number 5. Treat every person as your teacher. Marcus Aurelius had a practice that is detailed at the very beginning of the Meditations in a section where he lists the people who taught him and what he learned from each of them. He names his grandfather, his father, his tutors. But what is remarkable about this list is not who is on it. It is the attitude behind it. Marcus approached every person in his life as someone who had something to teach him. Not just the great philosophers, not just the emperor before him, not just the brilliant generals. He found something worth learning in everyone. From one person he learned gentleness. From another, patience with those less intelligent than him. From another, how to tolerate discomfort without complaint. He was a student of humanity. And this habit, the habit of approaching every human encounter as an opportunity for learning, is one of the most transformative practices you can adopt. Most of us do the opposite. We approach people with evaluation, with judgment, with the unconscious question, is this person useful to me? Is this person smarter than me, more successful, more interesting? And if the answer is no, we dismiss them. We are not fully present. We do not listen deeply. We are already looking past them. Marcus was doing the opposite. He was looking at every person and asking, what does this person know that I do not? What has their particular life taught them that mine has not? What quality do they embody, even imperfectly, that I can learn from? This is not naivety. Marcus was not blind to people's faults. He could see them clearly. But he chose to look also for what was worth learning, even in difficult or flawed people. Practice this tomorrow. In your next conversation, instead of evaluating the person speaking to you, become genuinely curious about them. What do they know that you don't? What has their experience given them that yours hasn't? You will find that almost everyone, when approached this way, has something remarkable to offer, and your conversations will never be boring again. Habit number 6. Never act from anger, but never suppress it either. This is one of the most nuanced and misunderstood aspects of Marcus Aurelius's practice. People often assume that the Stoics believed emotions should be eliminated, suppressed, denied. Marcus himself was clear that this was not the teaching. Emotions, including anger, are natural responses to events. They are not the problem. The problem is when we allow our emotions to drive our actions before we have had the opportunity to apply reason to the situation. Marcus wrote extensively about anger in the Meditations because it was something he genuinely struggled with. He was emperor. People defied him, deceived him, failed him, contradicted him. He had every material reason to act from anger constantly, and he did not. Not because he did not feel it, but because he had trained himself to create a gap between the feeling and the action. In that gap, reason could operate. In that gap, he could ask, what is actually happening here? What does this person need? What response will actually serve the situation? What will I regret? He wrote, how much more harmful are the consequences of our anger than the circumstances which aroused it? Think about the last time you acted from anger. The words spoken, the decisions made, the damage done to a relationship or a situation that would have been fine if you had simply waited 1 day, 1 hour, even 1 breath before responding. Marcus's practice was not suppression. He felt the anger. He acknowledged it. He sometimes wrote about it in the Meditations, working through it on the page, but he did not act from it until the anger had passed through him and reason had returned. Begin practicing the pause. When you feel anger rising, before you speak, before you send the message, before you make the decision, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, what response will I be proud of tomorrow? Let that question be the gate through which your actions must pass. Habit number 7. Serve others, especially when you do not want to. There is a line in the Meditations that has stayed with philosophers and readers for nearly 2,000 years. Marcus wrote, What injures the hive injures the bee. He understood that human beings are not isolated creatures. We are social beings, deeply interconnected, designed by nature to live in community and to contribute to one another's well-being. And he took this not as a pleasant idea, but as a serious obligation. For Marcus, service was not optional. It was not something he did when it was convenient or when he felt like it. It was a discipline, a practice, a habit he cultivated even on the days when the weight of empire exhausted him, even when he would have preferred solitude, even when the problems people brought to him seemed small compared to the enormous challenges he was facing. He wrote, "You were not born for yourself alone." He believed this completely, and he practiced it accordingly. This habit is difficult to talk about in a culture that prizes individual achievement above everything else. We live in an age that tells us the purpose of life is to maximize our own success, our own pleasure, our own personal development. And while there is nothing wrong with growth and achievement, Marcus would say that a life lived only for oneself is a diminished life, that something essential is missing from it. There is a particular kind of meaning that comes only from contributing to something larger than yourself, from helping someone who cannot help themselves, from showing up for your community even when you are tired, from choosing the well-being of the whole over the convenience of the individual. This does not require grand gestures. Marcus was an emperor, and his service took the form of governing a vast empire with care and justice. Your service might be helping a neighbor, listening to a friend who is struggling, volunteering an afternoon, teaching what you know to someone who does not yet know it. The scale does not matter. The practice matters. Habit number 8. Amor Fati. Love your fate. This is perhaps the most challenging and the most liberating of all Stoic practices. It was the philosopher Nietzsche who gave it its most famous formulation, but it is rooted in Stoic teaching, and Marcus Aurelius lived it as fully as any human being has. Amor Fati means this: not merely accepting what happens to you, but loving it. Actively embracing your fate, including the painful parts, including the losses, including the failures, including the things that did not go the way you wanted. Marcus faced extraordinary difficulty. He lost children. He fought devastating wars, some of which he didn't win cleanly. He dealt with betrayal from people he trusted. He governed through plagues and famines and political upheaval. He suffered from chronic illness throughout much of his life, and he did not merely grit his teeth and endure these things. He actively sought to find in them what was good, what was necessary, what was exactly right about them for his growth and for the unfolding of events as they needed to unfold. He wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you and love the people with whom fate brings you together." He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is not passive resignation. It is not giving up or pretending that painful things are not painful. It is a radical reorientation of your relationship to reality. Instead of spending your energy wishing things were different from what they are, you spend your energy finding the opportunity, the lesson, the hidden gift in what is actually happening. When you practice this, truly practice it, not just as an idea, but as a daily response to the events of your life, you discover something extraordinary. There's no experience, however painful, that cannot be made meaningful by the attitude with which you meet it. And a meaningful life, Marcus believed, was the only kind of life worth living. Habit number 9. Remember your mortality every single day. Marcus Aurelius kept death close, not as a morbid obsession, but as a clarifying lens through which to see his life clearly. The Stoics had a practice they called memento mori, remember that you will die. And Marcus used it constantly, weaving reflections on the brevity of life and the inevitability of death throughout the meditations. He wrote, "Think of all the great men and women who have lived before you. Where are they now?" He listed emperors and generals and philosophers and artists who had once seemed permanent, inevitable, immortal. They are gone, all of them. And so, he reminded himself, will you be? He described standing at the graves of people who had once argued passionately about who would be remembered, whose legacy would endure. And he noted with gentle irony that no one even knew their names anymore. Why did he practice this? Not to frighten himself into paralysis, but for exactly the opposite reason. Death, confronted honestly, is the greatest clarifier of priorities we have. When you truly feel the brevity of your time, the trivialities that consume your attention fall away. The petty grudges you have been nursing no longer seem worth carrying. The difficult conversation you have been postponing no longer seems like something that can wait. The life you have been meaning to begin living no longer seems like something to be endlessly deferred. Marcus wrote, "Perfecting yourself as a human being and becoming able to deal well with whatever confronts you, this is the business of life." And when you remember that the time available to you for this business is finite, genuinely finite, the urgency to begin, to live deeply and well, becomes real in a way that is impossible to access when you are unconsciously assuming you have unlimited time. Begin a small practice tonight. Before you sleep, take 30 seconds and say to yourself, "I will not live forever. This day is one I will not get back. Did I live it in a way that was worthy of a day of my one finite life?" Not with guilt if the answer is no, but with honest attention. And let that question inform how you begin tomorrow. Habit number 10. Govern yourself before you attempt to govern anything else. This is the habit that underlies all the others, and in many ways it is the most important of all. Marcus Aurelius governed the largest empire on earth. 50 to 60 million people lived under his authority. His decisions affected wars, economies, the daily lives of millions of people across 3 continents. And yet the Meditations, his private journal, his most honest writing, is almost entirely about one subject: governing himself. Not Rome, himself. His thoughts, his reactions, his habits, his character, his impulses, his appetites, his fears. He returned to this theme so often that it is impossible to miss. The most important work of Marcus Aurelius's life was not the external work of emperor. It was the internal work of becoming a person worthy of the responsibilities he carried. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He understood that a man who cannot govern himself, who is ruled by his appetites, his ego, his fear, his anger, cannot truly govern anything else well. His external authority, however vast, is built on a foundation of sand. But a man who has done the hard and constant work of self-mastery, who has cultivated patience, discipline, honesty, resilience, wisdom, humility, that man exercises a kind of authority that does not depend on external power at all. He carries his strength inside himself, and it goes with him everywhere, under every circumstance, regardless of what fortune brings or takes away. This is the deepest teaching of Stoicism, that the good life, the truly excellent life, is built from the inside out. That no external achievement, no amount of wealth or status or recognition can substitute for the internal work of becoming who you are meant to be. And that internal work is never finished. It is a daily practice, a lifetime of small choices, small disciplines, small moments of choosing character over convenience, wisdom over impulse, service over selfishness, attention over distraction. Marcus Aurelius was not a perfect man. He would have been the first to say so, and he did say so, on the pages of the Meditations. He failed, he struggled. He had days when the habits slipped, and he was not the man he wanted to be. But he came back every morning, and he began again. That is the final and perhaps most important thing to understand about these 10 habits. They are not a destination, they are a direction, a way of orienting yourself day after day toward the kind of person you wish to become. You will not master them all today. You will not even master them all in a year. But you can begin. You can take one of these habits, just one, and practice it honestly for the next 30 days. Wake each morning and remind yourself that difficulty is coming and you are ready to meet it. Practice distinguishing what is in your control from what is not. Give your complete attention to whatever is in front of you. Choose voluntary discomfort. Approach people as teachers. Create a pause between your emotions and your actions. Find opportunities to serve. Embrace your fate completely. Remember your mortality. And do the constant, daily, never-finished work of governing yourself. These are the 10 habits of Marcus Aurelius. They built one of the greatest human beings who ever lived. And they are as available to you, right now, today, as they were to him in the 2nd century of the Roman Empire. The only thing that has ever separated anyone from the life they were capable of living is the willingness to begin. So begin. Not tomorrow. Now.